Sauce.
Hey, you like Pez?
It looks like that. Here's Heaney from the boundary line. He's an expert at these. From the boundary line!
Hello and welcome to the Behind the Boundary podcast. I'm your host, Pez. I'm here with Sauce and we are here listening to part 2 of our ladder predictions at Behind the Boundary podcast. Now, part 1 we put out last week and we only put 9 spots out. They were chosen at random and there's a few gaps, as we can see on Twitter at Behind the Bound if you want to have a look at what it is, and the full ladder will be posted at the end of this show, Sauce.
Yeah, welcome guys. Correct, Pez. There's a few spots still missing there. A lot of fun from that first show. Make sure you go back and check that out. But we've both got the top 2 spots. We've got rounding out the 8th, the 7th and 6th spot still to sort of go between the two of our ladders. And you've got an 18th there still, Pez. So there's still, I wonder who's going to be slotting into that 18th spot there, Pez, knowing your history with a lot of teams.
Oh, there'd be a big mystery around that, I'm sure. Some of the loyal listeners would not know. One of the interesting things that came out of part 1 was the big discrepancy where I had Richmond at 3rd, making the top 4, and you had them at 11th, Source. So interesting to see if there's any discrepancies today. Let's get straight into it. 9 teams to get through. The first team we'll go through is GWS. Now, in 2021, GWS finished 7th. So they played in the finals. They won 11 games. They lost 10, and they drew 1. Now, they didn't do too much in the off-season with all their assets. They did do some re-signings with Kelly recently and things like that. So they have got Jared Brander from the West Coast Eagles. So he's come across. So he'll be an addition, I'm sure, into their 22. And their injuries at the moment, you've got, or suspensions really. Toby Green to round 6, Braden Pruce, he's suspended until round 2. And Sproul's got a shoulder, 3 to 4 months. Brett Daniels also 4 months as well, and Buckley's got his ACL, so he's due for mid-season. But Toby Green is the big loss there back in round 6 because he got the extended suspension for contact with the umpire during that elimination final, Source.
Yeah, it's really disappointing for the Giants to start their 2022 campaign with their captain out. Toby Green, as you know, is an absolute superstar, and he's definitely the barometer, despite what some people say in GWS. He's definitely the GWS's barometer. I found GWS really tough, Pez. Fans of the show will know that they've been a sort of a love-hate relationship for us over the last couple of years, but after watching them last year and the way they sort of finished up, so they finished 7th, as you said, and they had a win over the Swans in the qualifying final. They probably got the Swans, who were the season probably went a little bit long for the Swans last year. They were the sort of first sort of finals campaign you expect the Giants experience to go through, so that's a tick for them. But is it a real tick? They had a game against Geelong, which realistically no one could win in that qualifying final, so really, really disappointing for the Giants to finish off that after a really, really slow start to the season. I think that they're going to continue on this year. No, Toby Green is really, really, really pivotal for them, not till around 5, but I can't see them fixing the main deficit last year. Last year, we continually talked about how they have a lot of talent, but no game plan. They are inconsistent, and it's actually really hard to watch football at the times. They have a real sort of me mentality and not a we mentality. I don't know why they're not using a range of their different their skill sets. Every year a team drops out of the 8, and I think GWS this year is the really easy one to put them dropping out, Pez, because no Toby Green. You've got a range of different players who are sort of inconsistent. Their style of football is non-existent as well. I've got them finishing quite low, Pez. For 2022, Pez, I've got them finishing 10th, so dropping out from that 8th spot, that 7th spot, dropping out. And look, they'll win the games against Hawthorn and Collingwoods, your North Melbournes, but they need a lot of things to go right, and they need the mentality of their playing group to actually change, which I don't know if they're capable of because we haven't seen it for the last couple of years. Last year we spoke heaps about the coaching deficit and what's going on there with their coach. I think with Alistair Clarkson floating around, this list is ready-made for Alistair Clarkson to come in and change it. I wouldn't be expected if they go the first 3 or 4 rounds, and I predicted this last year, Pez. Boom. First sacking is going to be GWS, the coach, and it's going to be all over for them. And then we get Alistair Clarkson in, hopefully not for my prediction, because then they'll finish a lot higher.
Oh, mate, just go with your prediction year after year until it comes true, huh? We'll see.
Exactly right.
Okay, so that was the last year's prediction before round 5, but didn't end up happening. Should have happened in the end, but they did make the finals, and he's got his job saved there. So 10th place Source, so still fighting for the 8, GWS, if they can get some things right. For me, we've got Finlayson, who goes out, so he was the one playing up forward for them, and Brander comes in, as we said. I don't find it's too much difference. They've got a few other players to fill in that forward line there and be able to do that. The giant challenge is their consistency and to be able to play tough footy. So last year they tried the kicking game and they always seem to fall apart at half forward. So they don't have their players. When Jeremy Cameron was in the side going a couple of seasons back, he would have to come up to half back and the wing to get the pill, and then he couldn't kick it to anyone because they didn't have any marking targets. They were trying to do their finesse type game and it didn't quite work. Same with last year, Toby Green in games that they lost, he would play in the midfield, he'd come up, he'd be fantastic, but they also needed him as a target up forward, whether it be to kick his 3 goals or to just be a decoy and then anyone else can pop up and kick a few. So I think because he's out the first 3 games, they need to pick up at least 3 of them to be in with a chance to, compete this season and get in the 8. And if they don't, it puts them behind the 8 ball. And I think without Toby Green, it's going to put them behind the 8th ball. And surprisingly, Source, I've got the same as you. I do have them finishing 10th.
Yeah, I think they're one of those teams that every year, Pez, that you really, really root for them and you want them because, as you said, the playing list is so good. You've got, the likes of Kelly, Canelio, Toby Green, our favourite. But they just can't seem to all put it together on the park. And another disappointing year for the Giants if our predictions are right and they finish 10th.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they do. But we get to move on to the Premiership, the team that is trying to back up and go back to back.
Yeah, one of the hardest things to do in football, Pez, go back to back, and that, of course, brings us to Melbourne. Last year, they finished top of the ladder, won the premiership, 17 wins, 4 losses, and a draw. The only real big inclusion for them is Luke Dunstan, that got brought in from your Saints, Pez. That sort of big sort of bustly sort of midfielder / defender that can go in there as a bit of insurance, I think all it is, in case someone gets injured. In terms of injuries as well, they're looking pretty healthy going in. Christian Salem will be a test for round 1. Michael Hibbard will come up a bit sore after his practice game. Same with Stephen May, but otherwise they are ready, cherry ripe for the season opener on the Wednesday night, Pez.
Yeah, well, we'll speak about the season opener in our round 1 preview show tomorrow, Source. But talking about Melbourne and 2022, the big question mark is premiership hangover. Will they have some form of premiership hangover, especially having the season long, playing the grand final over in Western Australia? Personally, I don't think so. They're a young side. They run the ball, they take risks, but they've added that skill side to it. So they were trying to do that a few years ago, and they just didn't have the skill behind it. They turn it over in the middle of the ground and get rebounded against very easily. It didn't seem to happen last year. They only lost 4 games. They were able to turn it on at the drop of a hat. You got Oliver in there. You got Petrarca as the best player in the competition. He can come out in a quarter and pretty much win you a game, as we saw in the grand final, the Norm Smith medalist. So the other question I've got is, can other sides adapt? And if the game is on the line, is there going to be anyone else that can step up like the Bull Petrarca? I don't think there will be. I do have them finishing not on top, Source. I've got them finishing 2nd.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Pez. I've got them finishing 2nd as well, so that's 2 in a row that we agree with. We could be on for a bit of a trend here, Pez. Actually, looking at our gaps, definitely not. But I totally agree with what you're saying. I don't think it's so much as a premiership hangover as everyone sort of labels it. I think they go from the hunting to being the hunted, and I think it's really tough to repeat. You're going from each week where you've got a 50-50 shot to now every team is planning for you. And they were, one of the most dominant final performances in the second half of football that we've ever seen. They have an amazing list and, their game style is so heavily reliant on getting the football that they just beat you because they don't allow you to have the football. The issue is going forward into this season is that every team has had 6 months to model off Melbourne. They've been watching Melbourne. They will get 17 teams week in, week out that are going to beat them because they are the best team and they are the reigning premiers, and that can be really fatiguing. You look at, I liken it a lot to when you go through to the NBA season, when Golden State, after they won that first one and that second one, they sort of just coasted along. They lost games they needed to lose, they won games, but then it came into finals mode and boom, they turned it on. And I think that's what's going to happen is that Melbourne, they're going to do enough to be able to get that top 2 spot. First or second, they'll be thereabouts. They'll drop a couple of games that they shouldn't. They'll be, experimenting a range of different things. But most weeks, everyone is going to be targeting them. In saying that, Pez, they're easily the best list. They don't really have many deficits. They've got an amazing, number 1 ruckman. They've got an elite midfield. They've got, I think, looked at Robbo's top 50. They've got 3 in the top 5 players in Gorn, Oliver, and Petrarca. And then, the only real deficit they've got is sort of that forward line with Tom McDonald, but their back line is strong. They've got a lot of outside runners. They've got a lot of things that they're going well. Outside of injuries and that fatigue aspect, I can't see them, losing too many games. That's why I've got them finishing second. Just there'll be a lot closer games. There'll be a lot of fatigue coming in and not going through that season, as everyone thinks, I think, going through undefeated. But I think that there's a lot of teams around that got better. They are being the hunted, though, Pez, and it's a big difference.
Hey, what's going on? We had 9 teams last week. We didn't have them in the same spot. We start with the first 2 and we got them in the same spot right off the bank. The next one won't be because you've already declared your wooden spoon, I'm pretty sure, last week, Source. But this team, one of my favourite teams to talk about on Behind the Boundary podcast is North. So North Melbourne. Go from Melbourne, who finished first, to North, who finished 18th. They got another wooden spoon. They only won 4 games. They did have a draw, lost 17th. So they're complete opposite of Melbourne. I'm going to say some positive things about North, though. So those listeners, I hope they haven't tuned out, Source. We've got some pretty good recruits. Callum Coleman-Jones from Richmond, the young forward up there. So I think he comes in, he's going to do very well. They got Hugh Greenwood off a Gold Coast error because he is a tackling machine. You put him in the midfield, he's a big body. I think he'll do really well in the North Melbourne colours there. And then 10-goal Tommy from Adelaide Crows, he was going to be retired by Adelaide. So he's going to come in and offer something, that link between half forward and the forward line. And their number 1 pick, Jason Horne-Francis, he looks impressive. Needs to get his kicking boots on and kick some more goals, but they've done really, really well. There's 4 players that will slot into their best 22, and I'm very happy to see that. You've got some injuries. Zerha soreness before run, he'll be fine. And Ben Cunnington, unfortunately, the reoccurrence of testicular cancer, so indefinitely out. And when your best player of the last 5 years is indefinitely out, you're going to struggle a bit, even with your recruit Source. Yeah,
you're right. And it's a real deficit for North to start the season without their leader and, as you said, their best player for the last couple of years. But they do go with an instant replacement in Jason Horne-Francis. This kid is elite, Pez, and from every regard, watching him coming across from South Australia, boom, straight into the team. He looks like a leader. He had a pretty impressive pre-season game where he kicked, he had 15, 16 touches and 2 goals too. So he looks elite. He's a great kick, very similar to David Mundy. Pez is a great kicker of the football. But we're not going to be winning, premierships based off one player. But I like what they've done. As you said, they brought in a couple of good recruits. They've really lent into the rebuild. They got rid of, at the end of last year, 5 or 6 of their players just that were at the wrong sort of age group. They've kept around Todd Goldstein, sort of that leadership there. Otherwise, they look pretty good, Pez. Like, Luke McDonald had a solid season last year. Jed Anderson, he's a great getter of the footy. Jaden Stevenson had a rejuvenance last year with him coming into the centre with Hugh Greenwood, Jai Simpkin. They've got a lot of nice young pieces, Pez. And I use the word nice because they're not great. Do they work together? I don't know. But we've spoken a couple of years now. North Melbourne got the rebuild wrong a couple of years ago. They're doing it right this year, Pez. That doesn't mean they're going to miraculously jump up the 8. I've got them finishing 15th, Pez. And in 15th, it's like 1 win away from bottom in 18th with Hawthorn. So they could easily slip to the wooden spoon where you've got them, I'm sure. And it could be, it could be a little bit higher for them. But I think they've got enough pieces to be able to piece together a couple of good wins across the season. And I like the direction they're going. This year, finishing the bottom 4 for North Melbourne is definitely not a failure. But if they win the wooden spoon, do you win the wooden spoon? I don't know. If you get the wooden spoon, that is definitely a failure. So for North Melbourne, they need to put together some nice wins, put together a good sort of solid game plan, and just get reps into these young legs.
Yeah, nice analysis there. Now, I've already gone through the recruits that I do like. So there's 4 recruits that came in, but unfortunately they lost Trent Dumont over to Port Adelaide, and then Robbie Tarrant as well. So as that defender, so losing those 2 players as well, they get a little bit less depth, even though they bring in those other 4. Now they only won 4.5 games, Source. So surely they can't be as bad as 2021. You've got some other teams that are headed to the bottom of the ladder. You've got Hawthorn, you've got Gold Coast, who lost their key forward for the season. Collingwood is struggling. You might be able to pick up some wins against Adelaide, maybe a struggling West Coast, and then a few others. So you only have to pick up 5, maybe 6 wins to avoid the wooden spoon. So that will be North's go. They wouldn't be too disappointed if they did finish, say, 17th. 16th and avoided the wooden spoon and still got a really high draft pick to continue this rebuild. So we'll see what happens. Their midfield is going to be where it's at. Without Cunnington in there, though, I see them losing a lot of games. I think it will be between them and Gold Coast and Hawthorn for that bottom spot. But this is North, and I expect another wooden spoon to place just in the top of those premiership cups from the 90s in that cabinet. So just the premiership cups are sitting there and just adding it with all the wooden spoons.
Geez, a little bit of injury to insult, just chucking the spoons inside the cups there, Pez. I would not be putting them anywhere near there.
Well, they've got to be on display, and you can hold the premiership cup and bang it with the spoon, make a little bit of music, because they won't be singing the song too many times this year.
No way, Pez. You definitely don't showcase the 2 of them. But let's move on there, and that's enough about North. And you know what, Pez? I think that I was stretching out that segment a little bit because you actually said some really nice things about North, and it's rare. So it was nice for the viewers to get that before you get into the season of you just smashing North Melbourne every week.
Well, I don't have to smash them if they perform and they actually put in effort and do some things. So we'll see how they go in 2022.
We will. All right, speaking of the 2022, let's get on to the next team, Pez. We've got Fremantle. They finished 11th last year. 10 wins, 12 losses, and, they were sort of made a big jump last year that a lot of people didn't expect. They have some nice inclusions with Jordan Clark from Geelong, that big debacle about trying to get him across. Will Brodie from the Gold Coast Suns, and they're probably the biggest exclusion for them, or the biggest left was Chera. Losing a top 5 draft pick can be really tough, but Jordan Clark slots in there quite nicely. And in terms for injuries, Matthew Johnson, he's probably in doubt for round 1, and Nat Fyfe with that reoccurring shoulder injury, he will be a test for round 1, so he should be up and about and start Fremantle season off with a solid performance, hopefully getting their captain back.
Yeah, they definitely should. If Fife could stay in the park this year, they'll be very, very good. They'll be the best team in Western Australia over there, with West Coast struggling with injuries and things like that. So they need to stand up for the West Australians over there and try and make a good crack of it this year. I think this is a tough one, but I have enjoyed the coaching from Longmuir over the last few seasons. I think he's continuing to mould the defense into offense. They've been working on the defense for the last couple of seasons, and they've actually been playing quite well. So molding that into offense, working out what it is. I know Tabiner just recently over the weekend might be in doubt for round 1, so he's a big loss for that midfield as well. But they did lose a big part of their midfield. So they lost Chera coming over to Carlton. It's a hole that just can't be filled with somebody else randomly from the team. So everyone else will need to step up. Fife will need to lead by example. He experimented in the preseason playing up forward, and he's come out in the media and said, I'm not a forward. I am a midfielder, and that's where I'm going to play. And that's where they really need him to play. They need Mundy to continue to, drink his elixir or whatever he's doing and be the oldest player in the AFL and playing really well. So they need that to happen. They need Nat Fyfe solely to lead by example, play a Brownlow type year so his side can fight for the 8. I think because they've got games at home and because they're continually improving, they do lose Chera, but I think just with natural progression, I think they go up a little bit. I think they're going to fight for the 8, and I've got them just outside at 9th, Source.
At 9th, yeah. They're a really tough one, Pez, because, as you said, they definitely will be the best team in Perth, and having that home ground advantage of Perth and that fortress there makes them a really tough team, because that they're probably going to get 8-9 wins probably less actually, probably 5 or 6 wins, just on the fact of them being the best team in Perth, and it's quite a grueling sort of travel across there. As you said, they built quite a strong defence last year, and I like what they were doing, the coaching moves that they made, getting some real young elite runners in their back line. Their midfield was really strong last year. You had some absolute superstars in Brayshaw and Sean Darcy, probably playing the best football of their early career. With the inclusion of Caleb Sarong having another strong year, and as you said, Fife going back in there. Jordan Clarkson probably have some reps in there as well. It's a shame that a top 5 draft pick in Chera actually, left them for Carlton, but it does provide a small band-aid fix. They're not going to be able to build that consistency of back-to-back years playing with the same sort of team. So I agree, Pez. I think that they're a strong side. I think that they're going to be in that race for 8th, and I've got them finishing at 12th with more wins. I think last year 7 wins was a huge win for them. I think they probably get to about 10 wins, which will put them in contention for that 8th spot. But unfortunately, I think the list around them and the travel to Melbourne, as we know they haven't been a great travelling team, will definitely be their demise in 2022.
So what's your final number there, Sauce?
12th.
What'd you say?
12th.
12th, yeah. So thereabouts fighting for it. If they win 2 or 3 more than you expect, then they can fight for that 8. There you go. All right, the Adelaide Crows. Now, this is a side, a young side that has shown effort in the past, which is really good. They finished 15th. They won 7 games last year, Source, which was a lot higher than expected because they were with North for the wooden spoons. So 7 games was a good effort for this list. They lost 15. They add the left foot Jordan Dawson from the Sydney Swans, who come out of the back line from Adelaide, and they might need to be more attacking when they come off the half back line if they're bringing Jordan Dawson in. So a little bit of changing up. The injuries, you got Rory Laird with his hand. He's had hand issues for a couple of years now. He's out until round 4. Seedsman with a concussion indefinitely, so that's really worrying when you see concussion and you see the word indefinite next to it because you don't know what's going to happen with that. Lachlan Murphy is in doubt for round 1, who'd be in their best 22 as well. So a couple of injuries there, especially with Laird, one of their best players to be injured. Where do you have the Adelaide Crows?
The Adelaide Crows, I think they surprised a few people last year in the way they sort of jumped up and they had a couple of sneaky sort of wins there, Pez. I got them finishing 13th. I think they've got a lot of nice players and a lot of B-grade players. Ben Keys had an extremely great year last year. He really came out. I think the inclusion of Jordan Dawson, that's absolutely a banging move. You got Luke Nankervis in there as well. I think that's a great addition to them. They got a couple of sneaky sort of wins there. Rory Laird, Paul Seedsman, Ben Keys, Rory Sloane. Great sort of through the middle. They had some terrible off-field stuff at the end of the season with Taylor Walker, and he'll miss a fair bit of the early on, you would say, if he even sort of returns into that side. That'll probably be the big question watching Adelaide. I think that they will just do enough, Pez. They'll just sort of win games that they need to win. They'll be competitive against those bottom 4 sides. Hopefully they don't get blown out too much. But I think the big sort of watching point for them is that they've got to work out that forward line. Their forward line last year really, really struggled. They struggled to sort of get a big score. Tex Walker can't be your leading goal kicker going forward in 2022 if you want to see improving. You need to start to get some of those other guys involved and getting some more score coming from other numbers. And I just don't think they have the list there to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, they won some of their games early last season on the back of Tex Walker as well, with bags of goals in the first 3 or 4 rounds. It won't happen again this year, as you said. So, but 7 wins last year when they were predicted for under 3 wins or so. It was a successful year for the Adelaide Footy Club. So all you can ask for a team down the bottom is they continue to fight and put in the effort required not to get blown out. And that's what the Adelaide Crows seem to give you with their heart and soul. Rory Laird not being there. We'll see how they go in the first few rounds. Jordan Dawson, as I said, will force the coaches to play more attacking style out of the back line. So they'll need to change a few things there. There'll be hiccups, of course, with this natural progression and things like that. I think this side can win enough games to escape the bottom 4. I have them one below you, Source. I've got them finishing 14th.
14th. Oh, that's good for the Adelaide fans there, Pez, to get them a little bit higher and continue this rebuild. I just worry for them that they haven't really got any elite players. I think when your best player is sort of, Jordan Dawson / Ben Keys, that your future still needs some rejigging, and I don't know if in the next 5 years that's going to be a great place for the Adelaide Crows. But for now, escaping the bottom floor is definitely a victory, and keep getting those sort of sneaky wins that they did last year. All right, on to the big talking point of the off-season, Pairs. There are a lot of people that are extremely high on Essendon. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts about the Essendon Bombers. Last year they finished 8 wins, 11 loss. Sorry, they finished 8th with 11 wins and 11 losses. They had some not really any sort of big moves over the thing. They included sort of Jake Kelly from the Crows, and then sort of not too many other people just went through the draft. In terms of injuries, there are a couple of injury sort of concerns. Jake Stringer with that groin, he most likely will be out for round 1. He says that he's going to get up and play, but, with a groin, it could be 50-50. Anthony McDonald, Tip and Woody, he's out indefinitely for the moment with some personal stuff that's going on over the break. And Michael Hurley with that hip, he's also indefinite for the season of 2022. So a couple of big names in those injury column, Pairs. For a lot of people have extreme highly expectations for the Bombers. What about you?
Yeah, this is probably my most controversial one, which I'm sure you're happy to hear that source, because I actually really struggle any year to rate the Essendon list, and I think they've got some good young players coming in. Definitely, they've got Jake Stringer, who could be an absolute gun. Harry Jones, Archie Perkins are forward as well. I'm not as high on Nick Cox as a lot of people are. I think he goes missing a lot as a young player. Needs to come back in. And Jordan Ridley down back is really, really good. Now, last year you had Darcy Parish reach another level. You got Andy Mcgraw, who's continuing to rise. You had a disappointing year from, say, Dylan Shield and Devon Smith, who they're meant to be the absolute superstars in their source. You got Zach Merritt, who always does his thing. I don't think has massive impact on the game, but I think they really struggled. They had Nick Hind play out of his skin last year and run the ball and kick the ball, and they finished in the 8. But I'm not too sure. So they are finalists from last year, and the Essendon fans are going to ridicule me for saying this, but I find it hard to rate this list really, really highly. Hurley and Tipper, we don't know, when they're really coming back in. Hurley with that hip infection. Let's see if they can fly above 12th. And prove me wrong, source. All the way down at 12th for the Essendon fans there.
Wow, you've got them dropping out of the 8 and heading down 4 spots. That's pretty big, Pez.
Yeah, I just don't know what it is with Essendon. I think I just think there's other sides that are better than them, and Essendon have come out and they play 20, 25 minutes of pretty good footy, and they pile on a few goals. But I just think other sides can work them out, and the disappointing elimination final last year against the Western Bulldogs and down in Tasmania, I just think the young guys maybe won't progress, especially being key forward players as the fans hope, and the hype around Nick Cox won't progress as Essendon fans feel. And I have seen, since our first recording source, some people actually write articles, some very well-known people in the media saying Essendon finish in the top 4 and vie for a premiership. So me saying 12th, that's a big discrepancy.
Huge discrepancy, Pez. I've definitely seen those articles where people have said that some Mick Malthouse picked them for premiers, and he knows a little thing about football here and there. So really interesting how mixed people are on this list. And I guess the big premise of a lot of these people's predictions, as you said, is that growth of those younger players coming through, and you're also expecting to have a healthy Tipper for the whole year, a healthy Jake Stringer, where he kicks probably 50 goals as well as gets you about 20 disposals, because we know that when he's up and about and he's fit, he's one of the best sort of midfielders. He's a Bont-like in there, but the problem is that consistency with injury. I've got him finishing a bit higher, but it's one of those things that Essendon has easily the hardest fixture for the year. So obviously finishing the top 8, we know the AFL does that sort of fixture swap around where they have, they play a lot more of the top sides. They have got, being a big name, they play those games against, Essendon and Carlton and Richmond, and the 3 of those teams got better. So that's the big thing. Collingwood's still down the bottom, but they did get better, and they know where the ladder positions are for those games, that they don't actually matter. They've got a heap of midfield depth pairs, and that's going to be also a bit of a problem for Essendon. Is how strong they are in that midfield. You got sort of, Jake Stringer, when he's playing up and about, he sort of fits in there. You've got Parrish as well as being, an absolute match winner. But he also took a jump last year that no one expected. So this year teams are going to be planning for him. But they've also got, the likes of Merritt, Mcgraw, Devon Smith, Dylan Shield, and they've still got to find room for Jai Caldwell, the recruit from GWS, to get in there, and Cole Langford as well. So I think that there is some moves to be made that can get all those boys into the side, and they can have a really successful season. In saying that, it sounds like I'm speaking like you, Pez, and saying they're dropping out. I think that they're strong enough in that midfield, and I like the way that they played football. I think last year against the Doggies, they should have beaten the Doggies, and I think they played that game 9 out of 10 times. They actually beat the Doggies in that final. They win that first final, and they're through. And then they probably sneak into a prelim final against Brisbane, and they probably can make a little bit more noise, and people are talking a little bit more highly touted, and we actually get to see this talent on the park and how good they can be. I've got them finishing 6th, and I think last year I had them finishing 6th as well, and they snuck into the 8th. This is breaks my heart to say it, because you know that I'm not a big Essendon fan, and I much prefer to see your prediction, but I think that their list in their depth in that midfield, and the way that if they can spread that talent around the ground and get people to do different roles as a backup midfielder, then they can be really successful. So I've got them finishing 6th, Pez, and it's a big jump, but realistically it means nothing unless they win a final, and that's the big test for them, where they finish 8th, 1st, 2nd. Their big test is to win a final. And as soon as they win that final, we could see the floodgates open.
Nobody wants that to happen, Source, because it's been the biggest drought in a finals win since beating Melbourne in 2004. So I don't think they'll beat Melbourne in a final this year, but if they make it, they've obviously got a chance to pick up a win. But let's hope my prediction is more accurate than yours. When you were saying that the Essendon could have beaten the Bulldogs, interesting, on the NBA's on the TV in the background, Source, and you got the Phoenix Suns beating the Lakers at the moment, and just a little bit of halftime stuff that they do on the NBA. They've got PetSmart, and they've got a little race with these little dogs. They're not quite bulldogs, but the dog just decided to piss all over the floor. So I thought that was mentionable. They're going to have to clean that up, or ankles will roll in this third quarter. So just had to mention that there. But we move on to another side that has become a powerhouse, but are struggling to take that next step and get into grand finals. So you got the Brisbane Lions, who scraped into the top 4 on percentage in the last game of the season, which was really exciting last year. They won 15 games. They lost 7. They had Darcy Fort from Geelong, who, not sure if he's going to do too much. They've got a big loss in the injury column. They've got Eric Hipwood, who did his knee, his ACL. They're saying mid to late season return from an ACL is really, really difficult to return, Source. You got Dane Zorko with an ankle, who will test for round 1. You've got quite a strong list here. A few years running in the top 4 and just missing out in that prelim and struggling in that prelim, Source. Can they get across the line? Do you have them finishing in the top 4 again?
Not only in the top 4, Pez, I've got them winning the whole comp. They're my premier for 2022. I think they've been the best team in the comp for the last year. They were the best team in the comp. You could even make argument the year before. And the only thing that we're really talking about Brisbane is that when it gets to finals, does their finals footy stack up? And realistically, Pez, the last 2 years they've won 4 finals, lost 2, and we lost 3 actually, because they went out in straight sets last year. But the teams that they're losing to have gone on to be in either the premiers or actually into the grand final. You look at back in 2020, they lost to Geelong and Richmond, and last year they lost to the Doggies by a point. You could probably say that inaccuracy really cost them, and they lost to Melbourne, of course. So the teams they're losing to have just been through poor kicking, Pairs, and this is the one thing that we've been saying for 2 or 3 years now, is if they can kick straight, they are so dangerous. The amount of Arsenal they've got up there to be able to kick goals is incredible. We know how good Charlie Cameron can be. Joe Danaher, he didn't go up there as an absolute. He was going up there to be a superstar, and now he's getting the delivery in there. You also get the inclusion, hopefully, of Cameron Rayner coming back. A couple of years ago, everyone picked him to be this massive improver. You expect him to sneak into the midfielders there. But then you've got Bailey. He had a huge year last year. McStay, Lincoln McCarthy. The scoring power is elite over there in Brisbane, Pez. And I think that the biggest thing for Brisbane is that, I think they peaked really early in 2019. They had this massive jump where no one expected them to be there. And normally with that huge peak, it was only because of their list talent. So they had this big jump in 2019 where everyone's like, oh yeah, maybe they can win the premiership, maybe they can't. But realistically, this is probably when their list is actually cherry ripe and it's ready to go. It's at that age group. Lockie Neal re-signed last year, which is really pivotal for them. He's going to get a lot more reps in there, and I can't see them losing too many games, Pez. I think that they actually win the premiership. But not only that, I think they go very close to undefeated. I think the Brisbane home ground up there is pretty good. They know how to win away. They seem to have a lot of team chemistry. And as I said, I can't see any holes around. They've got an elite forward, all Australian forwards, all Australian midfielders, and they've got Harris Andrews down back, who we know is an absolute superstar. And they're going to be really tough to beat in 2022.
Yeah, I think Harris Andrews might be able to stop 2 metre Peter from Eston as well, and so they can finish a little bit lower. But I agree with you with Brisbane Source. I do have them finishing first. Now, if you look up recruits for Brisbane, there's no really recruits of note unless you include Cameron Rayner coming back from injury off an ACL and Lockie Neal, who was pretty much out the door, out to Fremantle, and everyone's like, oh, he's gone. But he's coming back again. It's a really good culture up there. They're going to miss Hipwood up forward, but as you went through the list, they've got other scoring options, with Charlie Cameron being at the centre of that. Home ground advantage will play a huge role, and they can secure a top 4 spot pretty easily in 2022, and I do think they will finish first. Now, just about Brisbane now, I spoke about the birth of my daughter last year, so Chloe, she got her, St Kilda jumper, St Kilda onesies that she sleeps in, all of those sorts of things. And I can't believe I'm doing it to her, but she's got no choice really. And then Cam Rayner sends down a signed Brisbane jersey, and Chloe's mother loves to put her in it and things. And it's very, very upsetting when you come home and you see her in another club's jumper. And then Rayner decides, I'll buy her a onesie as well. So Cam Rayner, back off. Leave Chloe alone. She goes for St Kilda. She will support you, and thanks for the signed jersey and everything. But just back off with the Brisbane merchandise a little bit, yeah?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than seeing someone you love in terrible colours like that, especially when you've had some, you haven't had their best sort of successful run in the last couple of years there. Pairs a little bit disappointing to see Brisbane up and about before the Saints are up and about. So, maybe Chloe actually might go to Brisbane and she can see a premiership in her lifetime, Pairs, because if she keeps following the Saints, that's not going to happen.
It's definitely not going to happen, and we know that, and I know that, but it's just something we have to do. But speaking of our club Source, they're the final 2 clubs. We've got St Kilda and we've got Geelong to go. Where are we going to place them?
Yeah, I know. I've really struggled through the last 2 podcasts, not being able to talk about my Cats or your Saints, Pez. As we know, we're both big fans of both teams. But let's start things off with your Saints, Pez. Last year, you finished 10th with 10 wins, 12 losses. A bit of a disappointing season after a really, really up and about 2020. So let's get into it. There was no real big inclusions there, Pez. You had Tom Campbell coming across from your favourite team, North Melbourne. Don't know who that is. He's been put on the list there twice, Pear, so you must be really, really up and about him. Looking through there, not much else to do. I just saw you changed it in the live doc. But outside of that, there's some big injuries starting off the season. Hunter Clark had that shoulder. He won't be back until round 5. Zach Jones with some personal things that he's getting through, so indefinite for that. Paddy Ryder with that Achilles is always interesting to see if he can stay around. He'll be a test for round 1. And Jack Billings probably returning early on with his hamstring. And Pez, the big one, Nick Caulfield, your mate, he's out for the whole of 2023. Really, really big blow for your campaign.
Yeah, definitely. Nick Caulfield being out isn't ideal for St Kilda, but Benny Patton should come in and slot into his role with him being out for 2021. So interesting to see where people have St Kilda. Probably not too high. 2 seasons ago they finished in the 8, beat the Bulldogs in a final, and then weren't able to make the 8 last year. Source really struggled, finished 10th, and struggled in a few different games. A quiet recruiting season, which isn't the same as the last few things, but they did some absolutely great things in some of the delistings. So Jack Loney will not be getting a game in St Kilda's 22 because he's actually delisted. So I haven't rated him as an AFL forward. He's a very, very good footballer and a VFL forward, but not in the AFL rights. Get the right 22 on the park, and I think St Kilda can actually compete for a top 8 spot. Hunter Clark not getting a good start to the season with that shoulder is very disappointing, but it's going to be a huge year from Max King. He's going to be up forward. He's going to win the Coleman medal. He's going to kick 60 plus, and he'll take St Kilda into the top 8 source in 2022.
Big call there, Pez. Where do you have them finishing? 8th.
8th. Yeah, probably lose the first one.
Right into the top 8 there. They're launching in there. Pez, I found St Kilda, and I've said this about a couple of teams. I think if St Kilda are healthy, they easily have the list and the pieces. If everyone makes the jumps, as you said, and Hunter Clark coming back, if he makes that big next jump, you got Gresham. For all accounts, he's had a great off season. If he comes in, you got the superstar in Steele.
Pretty much a new recruit.
They've got a lot of good pieces there, and of course, as you said there, Maxi King, if he can kick 60 goals, well, then it'd be hard to not have them in the top 4 and top 5. But the problem is there's so many question marks about where we're now ranking a team on their potential. If the last couple of years we've seen bits and pieces, they all need to put it together. I've got a few question marks about their sort of ruck combinations in Marshall and Ryder, and if they can get on the park for the same sort of time and actually put that together. Because when Ryder's there, for even how old he is, 34, 35, he's amazing. He tended, when he plays, he attends the most centre bounces around, and he's a pivotal part of how they get the football in there. I think now that we all expect and we know what Bradley Hill is there, we know what we're getting from it. Hunter Clark makes those moves. I think they can really challenge for the top 4, but unfortunately, Pez, they're the Saints, and they win games that they shouldn't win, and they lose games that they should win, and that's been the main thing that you've really sort of harped on in this podcast, and a lot of Saints fans will sort of agree with you here, and I agree with you as a general football watcher, is they're just inconsistent. If they can piece them together, they're going to be amazing. They'll probably challenge for 5th, maybe 4th. But if everything pans out the way that they have the last 2 seasons and those players don't make those jumps, or even if they do make that jump and they don't consistently do it, then I've got them finishing 9th and just missing out, Pez. But as I said, anything can happen from that 5 down to 12th. I think they're all chances of making the 8. And for your sake and for the listeners, Pez, I hope that my prediction's right and they finish 9th.
I think you bring a really good point. Is Paddy Ryder. He's a big key because if he stays on the park, he's one of the best tap ruckmen I've seen in my football watching career. So if he can stay on the park and play, 15 to 16 games during the season, that it'll go well for them to making the finals. Let's get on to Geelong. I think Sauce has been sweating not being able to talk to Geelong last podcast and most of this podcast as well. So they finished 3rd last year. They won 16. They lost 6. They add in a ruckman source, finally. Segler from Hawthorn. You could say recognised ruckman. They get Stengel from Adelaide, who's had a few personal issues. So they add in those two. They're the older retirement village down at Geelong. Segler, he's got a test for round 1. You got Duncan, Jack Henry, Menengola and Grime Miners, all tests for round 1, but should most of them be healthy? You've got Jeremy Cameron, you've got Patrick Dangerfield, so they're older at the prime of their careers, some towards the end, ready to fire. They need to try and get into that top 4, but then they need to try and win finals and get past that prelim source. How are they going to go?
It's really interesting. I was listening to a radio show the other week, and they were talking about Geelong and what the pass rate is for Geelong. Does it need to be a premiership, or is that the pass, mate? And that there's so much disappointment about the way that Geelong get into finals, and they just sort of thereabouts, and they're a dominant team during the season, and they fall away from finals. I mean, unfortunately for a Geelong fan like me, I don't think it's good enough for them to be continually dropping out and not winning finals, and I think that's something that needs to change. But they've also been losing finals against a lot of the potential premiers, and they've proven that they're better than most of the best of the other teams going into it. You get pipped on the night by Port Adelaide, who came out of their shell, but realistically they lost to the eventual premiers in Melbourne, who I don't think anyone was beating them on that night. What are they going to do for 2022, Pez? Who knows? We've been saying for the last 10 years that the premiership window is closing, and they just continue to do it. They're running back the same team, basically. As you said, they include a ruckman in Segula. That'll be fantastic for them. But realistically, I don't know, Pez. I really don't know where they're going to be. I think that they've got a really solid backline in Jack Henry, Tommy Stewart, Zach Tui. But as you said, they're aging. They're an aging side. They're going to be beaten around the ground in pace sometimes. They seem to have a really, really solid game plan for the regular season. Can they take that into the next stage and make it a finals game plan? Maybe. Or is Scott actually going to, in his last year of his contract, going to make some radical changes and try and win that premiership that he's been sort of searching for, except for the one that was gifted gifted to him in his first year. It's really interesting. I don't know what's going to happen. I've got them finishing 7th. I think that they win games down at the category that they need to win. They'll challenge against a couple of sides. I think that they'll beat Essendon in round 1 only because they've got a couple of injuries and they're a little bit depleted going in there. We play them later in the year, we'll probably lose that game. So I think that we'll get a couple of wins that we shouldn't really get. But I've got them finishing 7th, and the premiership window realistically is closing. I'd like to see some of these young kids make some decent moves this year and make those next progressions. But the only real positive I think that is there is that Tom Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron, the two-headed monster. Do you know last year they kicked 100 goals pairs between them? Think how much footy Jeremy Cameron won, and that's including finals. But they kicked 100 goals. If they can do that again, then of course they're going to be a top 8 side. So 7th me, Pez, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and if you're just hearing this, you've skipped enough of the podcast to miss what Sauce was rambling on about Geelong. So you can continue listening from here. But yes, Sauce, 7th, very surprising. You don't usually overrate your Cats. You kind of want to put them down and you want more. You expect more from them, but you don't want to, be disappointed if you say they're going to be in the top 4 and then they don't make it. So they're the Victorian side, Sauce, with the biggest advantage in the game. Playing at GMHBA 8+ times a year. No other Melbourne club get an opportunity to do this. So they're the club that if they've got a list ready to compete and they don't make the top 4, it'd be even more disappointing with that massive advantage that they do get. An average age of 25.7 being the most in the AFL. 96 games on average played as well, which is closing in on 100, easily the most in the AFL. They lost a bunch of fringe players, won't have a really huge effect. Scott didn't like Jordan Clark anyway. A player coming in, they might finally have a recognised ruckman, and their midfield will be very thankful in 2022. I mentioned Stengel. I think he can make a difference up forward. Just needs to keep the party in behind closed doors, which I'm sure the old folks at Cardinia Park will be able to guide him through that and help him along. A couple of pubs, rooms behind closed doors where he can keep the party in there and not get in the press and not wander the streets. And even if they do, the cops down at Geelong might just turn a blind eye down in that town. So Geelong, they've got that impressive list. They've got those players. If they keep them on the park, I think they finish in the top 4. I've got the finishing 4th, Sauce. I don't know how they will go going into a prelim final, but if you've got the likes of Dangerfield, Hawkins, Jeremy Cameron, Tommy Stewart down back, you're in with a chance in any game you play. So anything could happen in the top 4, which you'd probably be happy with that result listening to you. But they're my thoughts on Geelong.
Yeah, I'm hopeful, Pez, that's exactly how it turns out. And about halfway through the season, you'll probably hear me saying, when we're sitting 2nd or 3rd and winning games, that they're premiership favourites, and then hear me the first week of the finals and talking shit about Scott about how they're dropping out. They're an emotional roller coaster as a fan, but I'm glad that you've got them higher than I have, Pez. And I hope that that's the one prediction I hope that you're right with.
Yeah, well, and that concludes our ladder prediction for 2022, Sauce. So it'll be out on Twitter at Behind the Bound. Get in on it, comment on there, whatever you think. What did we get wrong? There's a few discrepancies between us and lots of discrepancies between experts. Like I don't even know if you can call Mick Malthouse an expert, Sauce. I know he coached the game for 30 years or whatever, but I think he's just coming out and trying to make a name for himself in the media, like a few of those players, ex-coaches and players do. Kane Corns rings a bell. He just wants to be controversial and make everyone comment against them. So they're against us. We'll see if the fans agree and whose ladder is better. Make sure you vote. Is Sauce's ladder? Do you agree with that more, or is it my ladder? My ladder will probably be closer in 2022. You can nearly guarantee that.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, Pez, because mine last year was a lot closer than yours was. Then in saying that, both of us had Melbourne not even in the 8 for both of our ladder predictions. So what do we know at the end of the day? That's the best part about making a prediction, Pez, is that, you can do all the evidence and you can do all the research and you can do all these different sort of philosophies about why it's going to happen, and then something, round 2 something will happen that'll change the whole landscape of the league, and we'll be left on our asses looking silly. So, yeah, make sure you jump on line and give us some banter about how we can, how we've gone with our ladder, and make sure you jump on to our loser comp, Pez. Jump on. There's only a couple more days before that closes. Follow on to all the social media links. Jump on the registration page. Jump in there. It's $20, only $20 to show up Sauce and Pez and show us how good you are at picking losers. No, it's not really a big brag, is it, how good I am at picking losers, but how long can you stay alive in the survival comp?
Oh, it is a big brag when you get that cash prize at the end. All 100% of the entry fees go to the eventual winner. So very unique in that way. A lot of other competitions also charge a fee and things, but no profit, not a profit competition. So get your money in, and you can win the prize at the end and have a nice little grand in your bank just before Christmas.
That would be a perfect little Christmas present there, Pez. Anyway, we better get things wrapped up, Pez. It's been a fantastic show. Really great to go through the second half of the ladders. I'm sure our media manager will post that during the week. And we're back for another show, Pez. When is our next show?
Yeah, Tuesday night will be the recording. So Tuesday night, you'll be able to listen to it, or on your way to work on Wednesday, ready for the season opener on Wednesday. You got the grand final rematch, Melbourne versus the Western Bulldogs. At Behind the Bound on Twitter. I'm Pez. Peace out.
I'm still Sauce. We'll catch up next time, guys.